Good afternoon and welcome to the Greg Tompsett Sports Show. You are joining us here today on this lovely Sunday afternoon to join me for my very first mock draft of the season. Somebody already gave me a hard time in the comments because I did say that I would wait until April 1st, but we've gotten through the first 2 full weeks of NFL free agency, and I underestimated needing like 3 weeks for all the free agency, so I cheated. I appreciate being called out on it. I did say I would wait till April 1st, but it's time. It's time. It's here, and I want to talk a little bit about first how I approach mock drafts, how I think they have a ton of value, but not in the way that most people seem to think they have value. Um, I love NFL mock drafts, and I'm playing around. For anybody who didn't read, get friend of the show that we've had on before, Arif Hassan is a great writer. He did a really deep dive into the downfall of the draft network and all the reasons that it went away and how the elements in here that had pieces of a lot of questions on what happened to the people that were involved. There's a ton of talent over there at different stages of their development. And one of the biggest pieces it brought back into my mind is how much I loved their mock draft simulator and that I loved all the pieces that they had. And I could pick up like Joe Marino's draft profile, or I could read Kyle Krabs or Ben Solak or Trevor Sikkema or all the crazy talented people that they had over there. And I could do all of it in one stop and be able to see it. And there are some nice mock draft simulators. We have a friend of Cover One who's kind of developed NFL Draft Fanatics as one. PFF has a mock draft simulator. Pro Football Network, the Mock Draft Database website has one that I'm going to play around with more because I like the idea of an aggregate mock draft database as the starting point. So pulling everybody's rankings in and using that as a starting point. I think that's a really healthy way to look at things, because one of the biggest issues with a lot of mock draft simulators is they have they're all very, very anchored to their rankings. So if they have one guy ranked really low and everybody always gets them as their fourth round pick or fifth round pick, and most people realize they're probably like a late second or early third round pick, it skews a ton of the information. So that piece of it really brings up a lot to be able to play with. So I'm going to play with theirs. We're going to start today with PFF. I think that I'm using that because I think it's the one most people use this time of year. Also, Trevor Sikkema's over there doing a lot of their rankings. A friend of the show, Brad Spielberger, does a lot of their contract stuff. People go really hard, including us at Cover One, on the grades at PFF, and I still am not a huge fan of those. But that doesn't mean that there's not a ton of good information and data and advanced analytics and metrics over at PFF, and we use it a ton. So I'm still a huge fan of their website. I'm going to continue to give them a hard time about the grades, but the rest of their website's pretty awesome. We'll go through and do that, and I'll bring it up here in a second. But one of the pieces I want to talk about quickly before I jump into doing the first mock draft is how I use them. A lot of people lean into the contest of, oh my god, look at this crazy mock draft that I did, and I can play with the bars on some of these sites and come up with one where I get Caleb Williams in the first, and I get Marvin Harrison Jr. in the second, and I get Lea Tulatu in the third, and I get all the best players at one week. Oh, here, look, I won, but it doesn't have any value. Like, that doesn't actually matter of being like, oh man, look at this crazy scenario that I got these guys to fall to me that everybody knows isn't realistic. So what I think they're really good to see is the opportunity cost and the pockets of value of knowing that, well, I do really like some of these wide receivers that are here on day 2, but if I don't take one of the first couple safeties, I don't love any of the rest of them. Or, hey, I really like some of the first couple defensive tackles, but I don't really like any of the safeties that make it later. Or, hey, I really like a lot of the corners that are available on day 3, or I like a lot of the interior or offensive line guys, but I got to take one by the 4th round. I like that idea. And if you do a whole bunch of these, you start to feel those pockets and know that, hey, I like the depth at wide receiver or at running back, but I know I can't wait past the 5th round. I got to look, hey, 4th or 5th round to be able to find one of those people and be able to go through and identify where those pockets sit and some of the barriers of where they are to be. Hey, let's keep in mind here as we move our way down, let's look and see where some of those pieces are. So if you have some questions on the draft, our awesome producer Chris Seth is going to jump up here with us in a moment when I pull up the PFF site, and he'll ask some of the questions that you guys have. So get those into the chat here, and as I'm doing the draft, we'll do that. But here's my goals for today's mock draft. One, I am not a trade up guy. So there are, in theory, I don't think any of the top three receivers are going to fall, honestly, maybe past pick 6 or 7. I think that all of them are going to go like 3 quarterbacks, 3 receivers. If the fourth quarterback, if JJ McCarthy sneaks up there, maybe the receivers start to fall to 7th. But I just don't, I think in those top 6, 7 picks, all the top receivers are going to go. If, in theory, Romadunes or Malik Neighbors fell to 10, 11, 12, maybe you could convince me that we need to give up a future first to go up and get one of those guys. I still don't really want to. I don't want to give up 28 and 60 and a future first and walk away with just one guy. But I get it. Those are studs. Those are guys who would probably be wide receiver 1 in most drafts over the past decade. And then being able to go kind of identify where you would look at that and what's realistic. There aren't any other positions. So I know one quick question here before we get into it. William was asking, is it possible for us to draft Byron Murphy, or will he be gone too early? Are we more likely to be looking at Johnny Newton? So one, I actually think Johnny Newton's a little closer to Byron Murphy than people seem to have it. I think that he's also super disruptive and a really talented player. I think Byron Murphy's really, really good. I don't know that I want to trade up for any defensive tackle. Like, I don't think there's a Quinnen Williams or a Ned Oliver in this draft. I don't think there's that guy. I think Byron Murphy's a good player. And again, if he fell to like 20 or 21 and we only had to give up, a future third or some combination of later picks, I don't want to give up pick 60 to go up from 28 to 20 to get a defensive tackle. Like, I don't, we're not in a position to do that. I want some of those. I want as many of those valuable top 100 picks as I can get. So I will be shocked if I want to trade up. I do think there's a lot of players who could be available at pick 28. Chris will kind of be the little devil and conscience on my shoulder, asking the questions of, hey, is it wide receiver no matter what, or what are the other positions we want to consider? So we'll see what's there at 28. I actually don't hate the idea of trading down a little bit. I think that there are some guys, if there's not one of the very top tier players that we really like, that's an obvious pick, which is great. If one of those guys make it to 28, we'll run to the podium and take it because, hey, we got what we think is a top 15, top 20 talent, and we'll take it and run. If that's not the case, and let's say there's 4 or 5 receivers that I still like, maybe I'll trade down to the early to mid 30s. I don't want to go past like 40. But in that range, 35 to 43 is about my cutoff, where I think I could still get a pretty good player. If I could pick up that 3rd round pick back that we lost, I'd be open to that. But most of today's exercise is going to be looking at, okay, if I take one here, am I going to regret the kind of player that falls later on at another one of those positions? Where are the positions I can wait on, and how do we want to put that together? Excuse me. So that's what the exercise is going to be about today. And for me, you guys know I spend a ton of time on contract projections and researching free agency. I obviously am around smart people that work on the draft. We have a lot of really good ones at Cover One. Eric, Anthony, Steve Mathis over on the Air Raid Hour puts a ton of work into it. We have our new guys, obviously, that we're going to have with Aaron and I Wednesday night. You get to meet Daniel Harms and John Helmkamp. I've been reading their stuff and keeping up with it. I also I do listen to Joe Marino. I do listen to Ben Solak. I do listen to Trevor Sikkema. Like, I've been listening to the general consensus on the draft for a while. So I'm familiar with names. I know where it is. I just haven't dug in to start to do my research yet. And this is where I shift gears. I shift gears now to dive into my cramming for a test. This is like when I skipped a bunch of classes during the semester and now I got to hurry up and get ready for the final. I got about a month. I got about a month ready. I'm going to have a couple classes to get myself ready, and I'm going to cram and, read all the really smart work of all these other people and get myself ready for the final exam here that's coming at the end of April. So without further ado, that's what we are going to do tonight. Let me pull this up on screen and see how it looks. I can adjust it a little bit here. I might put us down in the corner, and I'm going to bring up our friend and awesome producer, Chris. How we doing?
Hey, Gregory, I am entirely ready to mock you. This was a roast, right?
Exactly. Obviously. I'm going to
Good news.
squeeze that
Good
in
news.
a little bit. I might even bump up the size a tiny bit just so the font is as big for everybody as possible. Even do one more there. There we go. Okay, so again, I have it set for, we'll do all 7 rounds because I want to just talk through the different positions. And if we go with safety and defensive tackle early, what does that mean for defensive end? If we get defensive end and wide receiver early, what does that mean for safety and defensive tackle? I am going to be focusing on, there's 5 positions. I'd love to make sure I check the box early on, as early as possible. So wide receiver is right up there at the top, defensive tackle, defensive end, interior offensive line, and safety. Those are the positions that I want to make sure we get in some of the first picks. I won't mind if we get a nickel corner who can play special teams or return. If we get a big, thick running back, that sounds great. Maybe prior to the Trubisky signing, I would have done a backup quarterback, but I don't really want to spend money on that. We'll probably have Shane Buechele as the 3rd quarterback on the practice squad, and Mitch will be the backup. So I probably won't take a backup corner. The same thing. We already have 2 punters on the roster, so I'm probably not going to pick a punter. We're pretty well set there. So some of the other ones will be, special teams linebackers late, special teams cornerbacks late, developmental offensive tackles late, and I wouldn't mind 2 wide receivers or 2 defensive ends or 2 defensive tackles if the right thing falls, so we can let some of that competition happen. Again, we have a fair amount of picks, so I might play around with them a little bit later, but I won't go crazy on trades today. All right. Chris, any other things we should set the parameters on before we go? I have it set. I'm not going to go as fast as it goes, just so we can talk a little bit in between picks and watch the board. I usually set these in the middle. I don't go crazy on positional value or draft for need. I also try not to do skewed fully to the PFF board. I try to use a little bit more of the mock, the general consensus on things.
Yep.
And I leave some of the randomness up just because that's what happens every year in the draft. We never know exactly what's going to happen.
I don't see where the little box is for only wide receiver in round 1.
I will set that. Obviously, that's an important setting that I want to have wide receiver only. And also that we should clearly trade up to pick number 4 and take Marvin Harrison Jr. Those are the 2 parameters.
Agreed.
I have a force trade button here, so I can just force it through and make them do what I say. All right, let's go through here. Let's see where it goes. I'm going to click start draft, and we'll see what starts happening. So obviously some of the quarterbacks, there it goes. All the receivers and quarterback go right off the bat, which I think is very likely to what we're going to see. I'm going to pause real quick here. So obviously we've now gone through a little bit, and I think, again, the quarterbacks and the receivers with 1 tackle, I think is super likely of what the top of this draft is going to be. All the way through there, I think the 1 edge, Byron Murphy going 10th, I think is super likely. JJ McCarthy right up there. And then you start to see some of the other guys with Quinion Mitchell. Jared Verse is a guy that if something crazy happened and for somehow Dallas Turner or Jared Verse fell to us, that I'd be interested in that. But I think this is going pretty much how I would have expected it. And we're also getting to where I paused here for this reason. I think some people seem to see this wide receiver class with a harder ranking than I do, and I see it as a top 3 that I think Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, and Marvin Harrison Jr. each would have been the wide receiver 1 in most of the drafts in the past 15, 20 years. Like I think there's with the Larry Fitzgerald year and the Calvin Johnson year, maybe the Jamar Chase year and things like that. Like some of those guys are also up there in prospect rankings. But ultimately, like these guys would have been the wide receiver 1 in an awful lot of years there. Yep. So if you have a chance to get one of those, that's great. But once you get past there, I think if you asked a lot of NFL teams, if we could see their draft boards, I think there might be 6, 7, 8 different guys who would be wide receiver 4. And that, sure, maybe more of them are Brian Thomas Jr. or A.D. Mitchell than others, but Xavier Worthy or Xavier Legette or Troy Franklin or heck Jalen Polk and guys like that. I think some of those are wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 4, the top of that tier on NFL teams' boards. And I don't think there is a guy that like, oh, if it gets to 18, 19, 20, are you going to trade up for this guy? I don't have a guy like that I think is separating himself from that tier. Do you see it differently than that?
No, I think the value in this class is its depth by and large. And like Marvin Harrison Jr. Is clearly, a once every 10 years kind of prospect, and Neighbors is 1A to that. Odunze, and is it Odunes or Odunze? I don't know. My pronunciation today is going to be
fancier,
terrible.
So let's go with the Dunze.
Yeah,
It sounds
okay.
fancier.
Okay, sure. But the day 2 of this draft is going to be a lot of guys who could have been, top 10 of a down year in a wide receiver class, let's say. And so I think that value is really in trying to get the best player you can at a position of need, obviously. But if that isn't wide receiver in round 1, like there are 14 guys that are going to be great wide receivers. Come day 2.
So here I let it go a little bit further, and we now got down to pick 24, A.D. Mitchell. Finally, Adonai Mitchell from Texas, who I think is one of those size speed guys that is very intriguing. I totally get why people get excited about that. So that also means that we only have 4 more picks and only 1 more receiver is gone. This is a perfect scenario for me where a lot of the choices are there. I would guess another 1 or 2 are going to go in these next couple picks, but that also means that I feel pretty good that, we're in a good spot here. So I'm going to, again, let it go a little bit. Okay, we got 2 more. Johnny Mitchell went. That is a guy that I absolutely would have considered. Jerzon Newton. Johnny Newton is a guy that I think is a disruptive defensive tackle. Cooper DeJean is a guy that a lot of people see him as a possible safety conversion, and he can play outside corner. Those are guys that I would have considered and would have been alternatives to a wide receiver. But again, it looks like one of the guys are going to make it to us here. So let's let it go. Brian Thomas Jr. went at 26. Tyler Nubbin went at pick 27. So this was actually a really painful 5 picks leading up here because you have A.D. Mitchell, Johnny Newton, Cooper DeJean, Brian Thomas Jr., Tyler Nubbin all went right there. And I think a lot of people see Nubbin as kind of a upper tier safety, the top guy. We'll see, who else is there. So as far as picks available to us, you have 2 of the top non-receivers that are there. So Jackson Powers Johnson is a stud center, can also play guard, is in this range to be able to go up. Laiatu Latu is a guy who is a freaky pass rusher. Good conversation earlier today on Twitter is with John Ledyard, Eric Turner, and our guy Daniel Harms as well, talking about just how unbelievable his hands are and how consistently it's he wins over and over and over again, and being able to help out with some of the different pieces that go with the like where you see pass rush win rate and those stats come from is a very, easy spot to see why people like him. So he did have the spinal neck fusion surgery before, which was checked out by the same doctor as Peyton Manning. UCLA is actually one of the foremost medical facilities in the country, in the world. And he's been cleared and played and seems very, very clear there. So I know teams are going to research that. They're going to have access to information we won't have. But as far as everything we've heard, is a very comfortable level there. So those are 2 of the prime non-wide receivers that I would consider, again, along with if Tyler Nubbin had been there or Johnny Newton had been there. With the spots that are here, I'm going to filter it to, let's see which wide receivers are there. So they have Ladd McConkey as the top option. For our fits, I like a Troy Franklin or a Jalen Polk or a Xavier Legette more for what we need. Although I really like Ladd McConkey as a receiver. I like Roman Wilson as a receiver. I like Ricky Pearsall Again, Jermaine Burton is a guy I like. They have Xavier Worthy really low here, which is interesting. Javon Baker is a guy I like a ton. So there's a lot of receivers left here, and I think there's still value to be had. So Chris, what would your little angel and devil on my shoulder be between Jackson
Yeah,
Powers Johnson or Latu?
yeah, and the comments love Latu right now,
Okay.
and I can certainly see that absolutely. But I do want to play that devil, right? And how real do you think the commitment to Connor McGovern at center is?
Um, so was it Tim Graham who did the article in the Athletic? I think Tim
Mhm.
Graham wrote
Yep.
an article about one asking about the challenges of the conversion, and also he spent most of his life playing center. So all through high school, initially at college, he moved around and has flexibility to play other places, but his preference is actually to play center. He's capable of playing guard. So that was a positive for me, in that, oh, this isn't asking him to learn to play center. This is allowing him to go back to playing center.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, so that calmed me a great deal. I
Mhm.
would say it obviously they started him every game and virtually every snap at guard last year, so they're
Yep.
obviously
Yep.
comfortable with
Mhm.
that. But I respect
Right.
the fact that they're going through and evaluating that.
Mhm.
I also think Jackson Powers Johnson can play guard too, so you're not married one way or the other. I think both of them have that flexibility and that capability. I am fine with it. I don't think I don't have enough. I don't have anything in the NFL, and I haven't gone back and watched the Penn State, clips, and certainly not his high school stuff. So I can only take them at their word that there's pieces for what he can do,
Right.
but I I'm okay with it. I think
Mhm.
that Connor McGovern at center and David Edwards at left guard isn't that different than Mitch Morris at center and Connor McGovern at left guard.
How do you feel about the depth? Because like bringing
Definitely a
Davards up,
concern.
letting Bates go. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want an interior offensive line piece, and I want to draft one within the first 4 or 5 picks of what we do here, but I also am okay asking Aaron Kromer, like, "Hey, who's the guy you think you can work with and coach up over the next couple years in case we need him?" Versus,
Right.
"Hey, who's the guy who can come in and play and start right now?"
Okay.
Whereas,
Nice.
so here, I think adding a guy like Latu as a pass rusher, especially with the age and injury of Von Miller, has a
Yep.
chance to be more immediately impactful at a, maybe not. I think people should value interior offensive line more than they do, but even the people who value interior offensive line are not going to argue that it's more valuable than an edge rusher.
Right. Yep.
So my temptation, I'm going to look real quick here. Who's offering us a trade down? So 31 is interesting because that's not that far to trade down. 42 is too far, 72 is too far. 31 is interesting. You're tempting fate because that's 3 picks, and those 3 picks could be, you know, Powers Johnson, Latu, and a receiver. And all of a sudden now I'm
Right.
annoyed that I traded down. Um, but there is, if it was, say, 31 and 94, and I got to do that, with moving up from one of our other picks, and we get back our third round pick and have a chance there. That's intriguing to me. Um, so let's now add this. So here, yeah, Zach saying take the trade and get a third. Um, so in this spot, there's still plenty of guys I like. And if my worst case scenario is, oh man, those guys went, I guess I got to take Xavier Leggett or Troy Franklin or a receiver at
Uh,
31. It ain't all that bad. So sway me. Where are you in taking Latu here? Which if he's there at 31, I probably would take Latu. Taking Jackson Powers Johnson or taking one of the receivers versus the trade down.
yeah, it's Latu or a trade down
Okay.
for me. The that pass rusher ability is something they have been chasing for a long time, and Miller gave that to them and then got hurt, which stunk. But he's got to prove that he can come back again from another major knee injury. So yeah, it's Latu or a trade down, and get one of those wide receivers later.
Hmm. So I'm also, this is not dissimilar to what Brandon Bean would do. I'm also looking so let's say we get lucky and that the Niners trade up and it's for one of the other positions here. I don't know. And let's say we get lucky and the Lions take Jackson Powers Johnson. Do we really think that two teams that need an edge, that Latu would make it past them? And this is similar. You heard the phone calls when Bean was trying to trade up for uh, Dalton Kincaid, and they were asking like, "You want a little guy or a small guy?" And he said, "A medium guy." It's like, "Oh, tight end," and then they kind of figured, like, "Yeah, all right. Well, if you're not taking our guy, we'll do it." So this is where I think that would come in, and I agree. I think their debate would be: do we take Latu or do we risk it and take the trade down? Um, I do think it's probably safer to just take Latu and be happy with it.
Yep.
I think there's a risk to it of where that would go. I don't hate that trade. I won't lie. I like the idea
Yep.
of getting back into getting that third rounder back to be able
Yep.
to have yeah, so Whittle's in here saying Latu is literally going to go at 29 if you don't take him now. I think he's right. I think he's right. I think two teams that both need edge is too much risk. And we got one, I don't think Latu is going to be there for us at pick 28 without trading up. So I think I would take it and roll the dice. So I am going to draft Leatu Latu. There's a bunch of people in here yelling at me. Let's see where the other ones went. So Darius Robinson, who I do think is interesting. Lad McConkey there. So the fact that the Detroit took the next edge, I think tells me that they for sure would have taken Latu. And God, can you imagine how crazy the internet will go if Xavier Worthy goes to Patrick Mahomes and the fastest guy in combine history?
I don't. I'll just turn
I'll
Twitter
log
off.
out for the rest of that night.
Yeah,
I'll just
that.
switch over and do the post draft show and not worry about people losing their freaking minds. All right. So in the first round, we went with Latu. I think that that's a really, favorable outcome. That's a premium position with a guy who maybe without the medical questions might be a top 10 pick. I actually don't think it's crazy that he could be a top 10 pick in this draft. So we'll see where that one goes. What now in private here? So I'll assume he's a military man, and that's his rank. Private is saying that what the huge run on wide receivers in the second before 60, I do think that's real. And where I was not interested in trading up in the first, it is a lot cheaper for us to look to trade up in the second. So here, Chris and I are going to monitor closely at what's there, and I will use some of those extra fourth, fifth, sixth, or maybe a future pick to be able to move up here to be able to go through. I like Whittle saying here, can't get the ball to Worthy when you're getting hugged by Latu. I like that. So again, I think we answered a huge question there at a premium position. We have the succession plan for Von Miller. We have the guy opposite Epinesa and Rousseau. I'm really happy with that pick. I like where we started. Now I'm going to let this go, and I'm going to just pause periodically to see. All right, so the first couple of picks, we got edge, a slot receiver, so I'll take that. I like Roman Wilson as a receiver, but he's not the guy or type I'm targeting. Oh, Leggett went Franklin. Oh, that was a painful one. Oh, that one hurt my soul. Okay, so Javon Bullard, Xavier Leggett, and Troy Franklin all went right in a row, but that's a little too far for me to want to trade up. I want to get closer to 50, so that hurt my soul a little bit. That's painful. Jermaine Burton.
Do you have any idea what Uber's new draft chart says it might take to get up in the second round? I don't know it well enough yet.
So, if we want to give up a bunch of them, a fourth and fifth and a sixth, I think we can get up to, here. So this is an interesting one. If Jackson Powers Johnson fell to 47, that's maybe interesting. But I also don't know that I want to move up and spend my first two picks and get no receiver. I think would be painful here. So again, we've lost Keon Coleman, we've lost Jermaine Burton, we've lost Franklin and Leggett. So we're still looking at Jalen Polk, who I like a ton. We're still looking at Javon Baker, who I like a lot. So we still have some strong options there, but it is getting now to where we're we've lost some talented guys that I would not be super excited about. Ricky Pearsall is still there. There's still some guys that I like, but it's getting a little thinner. If we lose more than one more of those guys, I think I'd have to move up here. So
There
Polk
goes
going.
Polk. Yeah.
Don't love that. So now it's at a point where do we risk the 4 more picks of losing a Javon Baker or a Tez Walker? Or do we have to move up a little bit?
Has Burton been drafted already?
Yeah.
Did he
So
go?
this is
Okay.
the danger of going with another position early is
Right.
you now run through some of the different positions here.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, I just missed that one. Yeah.
I'm gonna let it go. Okay. Okay. So we survived it. We got here to where now having, Pearsall, Devontae Walker, and Javon Baker are all guys that I still really like. There's guys later on, Thrash, Corley, Rice. I think we can double up with some of the players later. Cornelius Johnson is a player a lot of people like. Taj Washington. I still want to walk away with 2 receivers here. Anthony Gould is
Mhm.
another guy that I think a lot of people are high on. So my initial pick, I know a lot of people like Ricky Pearsall. I would probably take Javon Baker. I know a lot of people saw Devontae Tez Walker as a high upside piece. I would be leaning Baker. Do you feel strongly one of
Yeah.
the other directions?
No, like of the guys that we can see here, like Walker and Wilson, I'm probably crossing off. Um, and I think Baker, I think, is the one I like the best, and that's probably from seeing so many clips from Eric and Ant and
Yeah.
Daniel and John, and you get to see exceptional talent, hands, route running, a full package wide receiver.
So that's where I lean as well. And again, there are different spots here where the run that we lost early, there's some guys that I certainly would have liked. And if I traded back, Xavier Legette probably would have been the guy that would have been my fallback. If Latu had
Okay.
gone, I probably would have gone Xavier Legette with that pick at 31 if we had traded back. But I still like the idea of walking away with a combination of Latu and Javon Baker. I think that still puts us in a really good position. I'm going to let this run a little bit here. Um, there are some different spots that obviously now missing early. So here's a couple names that again in future ones as we play around with this, as Cam Kitchens starts to fall, I think that's an interesting one that maybe you can move up and make a move for. Again, some of the other receivers that are there. This is a very deep receiver draft. I think that there's a lot of potential talent, but I do think if we see, I think I also saw one of the other names I wanted to reference. Uh, he went quite a bit higher. Javon Bullard is a guy that if he starts to fall, I don't know that I'm going to trade up for him, but he's a guy that, if we see him fall and he's available there at pick 60, I would be very, very open to. But
Mhm.
again, later on, I think the poor testing for Cam Kitchens reminds me of, Micah Hyde tested really poorly too. I think Cam
Yeah.
Kitchens is a good safety and has a ton of potential. So if he's a guy that we saw fall a little bit more, I'd be very open to.
Yeah. Yeah, remember how excited Bean was when Gabe didn't run the
Yeah,
greatest 40 in the history of the world? Like
correct.
some of those testing numbers are actually a benefit, to guys if you want them to fall.
Seeing some other names that come up here. Michael Hall is a defensive tackle that I think is a good fit later on. Dadron Taylor Demerson is another one that, DTD is a guy you're going to see a lot of people excited about. I think there's a lot of potential there. Obviously, getting Jerry Rice's son is always fun. And then, Christian Haynes, Mahogany, I think are guys that you could see as an interior line. And, obviously, now that we signed both Daquan Jones and Austin Johnson, I'm not quite as enamored with my large adult son, Tavondre Sweat. I still would love to have a 366-pound enormous human to be able to put out there, but we have 2-1 techs now. It's not quite as
Right.
needed as it was before. I'm now much more focused on a penetrating 3-tech defensive tackle that's there.
Yeah, with
But again,
I was going to ask. Sorry.
go ahead.
sorry, with Latu already in hand, like other than wide receiver, what are the positions you're considering? Like not DT, probably not DE at this point anymore. Like
Yeah,
you've mentioned a bunch
I
of
would take
safeties.
edge.
Is edge? Okay.
Safety, interior offensive line. I would still look at a three tech. If we have a penetrating D tackle, I still think Ed Oliver, a guy that one can play some snaps when Ed comes out of the game because he doesn't play 100% of snaps. And on third and long, I'd love to have a guy that can play next to him where we don't have to have Daquan or Austin Johnson in. You could have another penetrating pass rushing guy. So that also could be a guy who's maybe a hybrid between the combination of both edge three tech that can play a little bit of both. I think some of those are interesting as well. So some of the bigger edges or some of the faster, more penetrating defensive tackles. So some names there. Audric Estime, our guy, Chris Kepner is our big in-house Notre Dame fan. So a guy there. All right, let's take a look at some of the positions. Sean Vaki, as one of the top guys on the board, there is very interesting to me as a safety. He's a guy. Is he the one that played like 4 different positions and like played some running
I
back
believe
and
so.
played
Yeah.
some other
Yeah.
spots for them and
Yeah.
like was like at one point like an Iron Man.
Yeah.
So here, yeah, you have him on the D line, slot corner. I think he did play some snaps on offense for them as well. So that's an
Yep.
interesting one. That's certainly standing out as one of the top ones. As a follow up at receiver, again, Taj Washington, Cornelius Johnson. There's some guys here I think we can wait to look for. Jordan Whittington is a guy that is very interesting as well. Let's look at some of the interior offensive linemen again. As we get through here, Tanner Bortoloni is a guy that I've seen a lot of people interested in and liking. So he's a guy that'll be, on my radar here in the next couple of picks that I think has some developmental potential there, and is a guy that you can bring in, let Aaron Cromer get his hands on and work with. I'm going to do both edge and interior defensive line here. I like the name Makai Wingo. I don't know anything about him, but I like him. Mason Smith is a guy who I think he's I've seen his name thrown around a lot. Is he more of one of the bigger, like, run defending guys, or is he more their, let's see, unique build for defensive tackle, long arms?
He is, I don't know as much about him, but I know
6'6",
he was expected
315.
to test well.
Yeah.
But he's a guy who is tested well, but the production maybe wasn't there to match entirely. So he's another one where I think depending on what you're looking for, you can find plenty of opinions both ways with him.
Okay. I would say out of the guys you're here, I do want to look for some of those positions as they come up, and will be very open. Braylon Allen is the guy that I like a lot too, as far as
Mhm.
adding like a size speed combination at running back. So Isaac Garendo is another one like that I think can add
Yeah.
a size speed combination that would kind of mix in well here. So I'd be leaning towards Vaki. I think that's a really nice fit at pick 28. We do pick again pretty quickly here with a couple other picks coming up. So, if I have a chance to get Vaki and Allen in the next 2 picks, I would probably roll the dice there to be able to then maybe get Mason Smith after that. So that'd be my targets in the next couple picks here. But I would probably lean on just taking the value of Vaki still being on the board at 128.
Yep.
Let's
Yeah, that's
do
certainly possible.
that.
Um,
All right, Mason Smith did go, but Braylon Allen didn't. So I would definitely take Braylon Allen here. I think that having
okay.
that kind of massive size and speed is the perfect
Mm,
kind of combo to add with a James Cook to be able to go there. And then we'll see what comes back at 144. I do want to still get one of the, whatever I can get in some of the best safeties left, and then look at some of the other, or some of the other defensive linemen left. So interior offensive line, I do want to get Bortoloni here, but we got a couple more picks to go that I could probably risk that at 160.
mm.
Um, defensive line and edge. Any names that you've seen people do work on? Tyler Davis, I've seen some things for. Miles Murphy.
Miles Murphy is the guy I've ended up with a number of times in my
Okay.
own mocks. But
All right.
They haven't finished all of their write-ups yet.
Yeah, still working on a couple things.
What do you think about cornerback at this point?
So
Do you
I
feel like
need
there's
to.
need enough there at all, or
I
are we
wish there was
trusting
a way
Elam?
to filter. And again, I have not, especially this deep into the draft, I do not know the guys well enough yet. Of the two things I would be looking for here, and that I do want, are who are some corners that have inside outside flexibility, who are
Mhm.
the guys who can play nickel and outside, and or ideally both, who can be a returner. So if I have a guy who can compete in the return competition, also be a backup to Taron Johnson, but also could play outside. I even care a little bit more about the depth here. I knew Chris Jenke was going to bring up here. They don't need a cornerback. They already have Jamarcus Ingram. Chris Jenke is leading the campaign for Jamarcus Ingram is going to make the 53-man roster. Which honestly is in play. I don't think it's crazy that he could be the Cam Lewis guy developing and working our way up. Again, here asking, is Joe Milton still available as a backup quarterback? I'm open to that,
Mhm.
but I don't see. We already have Mitch Trubisky and gave him some guaranteed money, and I don't want to carry three quarterbacks. So, if we hadn't have signed Mitch Trubisky, and honestly, I might even prefer having a rookie on a controlled contract versus
Yep.
Trubisky, but we
Yep.
already did it,
Absolutely.
so I'm not
Mhm.
going to mess with that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So here,
Yeah.
Jason
Before they
saying the
signed
slot
Mitch,
corner from
I
Florida
was thinking,
State looks good. What do we got here? I don't know. He might already be
I
gone.
don't even remember his name. Um, Someone
So
mentioned
yes, I
Devonshire
am
also.
interested
Is that a Pitt?
there, but
Yeah.
so far we've now added Leatu Latu, so we have our edge. We got Javon Baker at receiver. We got Vaki at safety. We got Braylon Allen at running back. So I still need some hog mollies here in the next couple of picks. I
Mhm.
need
Yep.
interior offensive line and defensive line. I feel stronger about Bordeloni than I do about any of the
Good.
defensive linemen. So I'd rather not mess around.
Okay.
I like him. I think there's great
Mhm.
developmental potential there. I'd
Mhm.
love to give
Yeah.
a guy like him to Aaron Cromer and tell him, hey, work on this and develop it. And then we have a chance, whether that's to replace Connor McGovern down the line or to move McGovern back to guard. I like that idea
Mhm.
of getting there. Nabil saying here that Vaki could also return putts and that is part of his versatility
Yeah.
that he
Yep.
offers there as well. That is absolutely accurate. That is a piece that he brings where that is. And I know some people here, this is actually my least favorite thing about mock drafts is, oh, not good value on Bordeloni. The
Mhm.
fact that they have him ranked 210th here is absurd. There's no possibility he's going to go that late. I don't think he's going to go. I don't think he's going to be on the board where we just took him here at 144. I don't think he's going to make it that far. So that's actually my biggest issue with mock drafts
Mhm.
is people then
Yeah.
get these numbers locked into their minds of where they think guys are going to go because this one website ranks in there, and that's simply not how it's going to work. Um, Having
Yeah,
those
and
kind of
a lot of
possibilities
time, a lot
there,
of those sites. Yeah. Sorry, a lot of times, a lot of those sites have to catch up
yes,
to a number of different things. So some of those numbers can be well behind where they'll end up. The last week before the draft, even.
yeah, 100%. So, I know, I just saw, and this did remind me, Whittle had brought up here that Christian Boyd is one that was a top 30 visit. So that is a
Okay.
interesting tag there. We just took our interior offensive lineman. So I would want to look, not that I want a true edge, but if there's like a power edge that can play three tech, I'd be open to that. So I'd be between Boyd or Miles Murphy. And honestly, the fact that one of them was a top 30 visits, probably as good of a tiebreaker as anything of
Yeah. There we go.
what's here at this
There we
point.
go. Mhm.
So yeah, I'm going to go with Christian Boyd. I think that gives us a guy who can then work as the backup there. And again, we come up again very quickly. Oh, I actually probably would have taken Taj Washington if he was sitting there. So I'm going to look real
Yeah.
quick here at corner. Um, and I'm actually going to look at receiver because I actually would double dip in some of these possibilities here. So I know Anthony Gould is another guy that people like as a kind of jitterbug return guy. So he's a guy that could compete
Mhm.
with that kind of spot to be able to be in. Why is someone trying to trade for a pick at 163? That's super weird, but
Probably
um,
McCaffrey.
yeah, yeah. That's a weird spot to be in. So let's look at corner. I know, trying to figure out some of the difference. So see here, this is playing mostly outside, but did see some snaps in the slot and as a punt returner and kick returner. Nehemiah Pritchett, welcome to the Buffalo Bills. That's exactly what I want. I want inside outside versatility where you can play in the slot and also compete at returner. Quickness and special teams experience makes him a quarterback to draft and develop. Nehemiah Pritchett, welcome to the Buffalo Bills. That is 100% what I was looking for here. I will go back when it gets back to us here. If maybe one of the guys, if one of the receivers makes it back to us here, I'd be open to it. But there's going to be guys. Joe Milton's still sitting there. This is another one. Kamani Vidal is a name that I think is a versatile guy that had got some attention. He's a interesting spot. I also would look here at some of the kind of special teams linebackers. And you want to know what? If you just showed me a list of names and said, hey, which of these names is going to be the best linebacker?
I don't even
the
know
guy's name is Steel
Chambers.
Chambers. Like his name is Steel Chambers. How can you not be a good linebacker and have the name Steel Chambers? So of course I'm going to draft Steel Chambers. It's just science. Like you can't have a name Steel Chambers and be bad at football. Like it just doesn't work that way.
I'm glad to see we've reached the deep analysis portion of the mock draft.
Obviously. And I will say some of the things that do go into how deep this draft is. I think Jordan Whittington's a good receiver and probably deserves to be drafted higher than late round 6. And it's the depth of this draft. He's a guy that I would love to bring in. And again, maybe you roll the dice on his ability to make the roster later. This is also an area where this is something I would lean into with a coach like Aaron Kromer, where I'd just be looking at traits. Who is a long athletic guy who brings the things that a guy like Aaron Kromer is looking for, that we know he can develop and work with. And here, Andrew Coker, 6'7", long arms, young guy that can develop. That's the kind of guy that he's going to be looking for to go through. And again, I'm not going to pretend to know the round 7 offensive tackle prospects that are out there, but I do know that the archetypes that what the Bills are looking for is they do value. We can't see enough of these Tommy Doyle, Spencer Brown, Ryan Vandemark. Like they very clearly have a type. And that tall, long-armed guy is one of the things that they value in what they're looking for. So those are certainly some of the picks there. So we've checked a lot of the boxes. And again, I know I saw a mock draft earlier from Eric Turner, and he was joking and saying the Bills have too many picks. And he's right, because there's like so many different spots of like, all right, so we've now taken an edge, a wide receiver, a safety, a running back, a center, a tackle, a defensive tackle, a linebacker, a corner. Like we've taken so many different spots here. So, again, if there's another guy that they like from just a developmental standpoint, maybe we can sneak them onto the practice squad to come compete, here. So Chris Jenke is my master of the practice squad. So if him and Whittle are both telling me to take Trey Taylor, well, hey,
how can you argue with that?
Trey Taylor, here you go. You are now on the football team. So again, this is the point of the exercise. These things are not designed to be like, this is the exact order that those things would go, but it is to show like, hey, if we have a talent like Latu dropped to us at 28, what does that mean at receiver? If we don't trade up in the second to get that, and what would it cost us to trade up? What do we end up with at receiver? I like Javon Baker a lot, but some people are going to look at this and be like, oh my God, I can't believe you only got Javon Baker. So some of these are going to be preferences of where they fall and how those things work. So having, Bordolini, Braylon Allen, Sean Vaki, these are names that I would have targeted and been looking for. Charles saying here, they gave the Bordolini pick an F. It's because they rank him 212.
Right.
It's because
they don't like it that early.
Their ranking is going. I guarantee that adjusts and works its way up as the draft comes closer and gets further in here. So The areas that we touched on, I'm really happy that we got value in the at premium positions early on. So we got a premium pick at wide receiver and an edge rusher. Safety is a need. Getting a running back that we think can be a big, powerful, strong pairing with James Cook, getting a developmental interior offensive lineman, a guy who can come in and be a backup, especially now that we brought back Daquan Jones and I added Austin Johnson. Here, yeah, Matt Drucker saying Tanner Bortolini might be a top 120 pick. I agree. I don't think we would even get him at 144. So the fact they give that an F is silly. But we'll still go back to where they put it. Then again, the rest of the draft is going to be who can come in and compete. We've lost a lot of snaps at special teams. So having the Saran Neal and Tyler Medikevich and even some other pieces that we lost in other guy having losing Trent Sherfield and having different guys that we've lost. Jordan Poyer was playing special team snaps at points. Like we've lost Terrell Dotson. Those are all guys that were playing a ton of special team snaps. So that's going to be a big point for me on day 3 is a linebacker who can play special teams, a corner who can back up nickel and compete at special teams, a big tradesy tackle who we can develop and be able to maybe sneak on to practice squad. The same thing. More guys. Trey Taylor's a DB who can come in and be able to compete on special teams as we go through.
Yeah. And again, the real value of doing these extras. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. They were just asking, did I take 2 receivers? I did. Javon Baker and Jordan Whittington were the 2 receivers that I took.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice.
All right. So thank you guys for
I'd be happy with
that. I was very happy with it. I'll put it out on Twitter just so everyone can mercilessly mock me for the choices that I did make. But this was a lot of fun. We'll do more of these. Joe Marino in here saying would be over the moon with Latu at 28. Yeah, I mean, it's just that kind of value would be crazy to pass up on. So we'll see what kind of things present themselves to Brandon Beane as it gets closer. And this is now, again, people like Joe Marino, guys that we brought on this year with John Helmkamp and Daniel Harms, the work that Eric Turner and Anthony Prohaska and Steve Mathis and guys do on the Cover One Network and other trusted people around the industry that I look at. That's what I'm going to start to dive into, neck deep and be able to have a lot of, informed opinions helping inform my opinion. So I am now going to dive in and be able to start watching some of that film myself, looking at some of those positions. I mentioned what I'm going to be focused on: wide receiver, edge, interior offensive line, safety, and defensive tackle. Those are the pieces that I'm going to be diving into and looking at. I'm really happy with the picks that we got here, but this was a lot of fun. Thank you, Chris, for helping kind of be my conscience and devil on my shoulder. Thank you guys in the chat. This was a ton of fun. We'll do more of these as we go forward. I'll have lots of other people on to be able to help play around with these and do some more fun things. But on behalf of Chris Seth, I'm Greg Tompsett. You've been listening to the Greg Tompsett Sports Show, and we are out.